Okay, welcome. Thank you for coming out on a Friday night. I know there are so many demands on everybody's time here in New York, so it's always nice to see new faces and familiar faces back again. I think this is now the fifth in the series of The Hand of Fashion, which started last semester and is continuing all through this. This is the second one this week. We were honoured to have Simone Cipriani in conversation with Omiemi Accarelli earlier in the week, and tonight it's with Bob Bland. So, at the risk of repeating myself every one of these events, let me introduce both of our speakers. Simone Cipriani, who's the head and founder of the Ethical Fashion Initiative. He founded and manages the EFI. It's a flagship program of the International Trade Center and a joint agency of the United Nations and World Trade Organization. The Ethical Fashion Initiative advocates a more responsible and sustainable fashion industry. The EFI harnesses the power of fashion as a vehicle out of poverty by connecting artisans in the developing world to the fashion supply chain. Since its inception, the initiative has evolved to work with emerging African designers to promote their talent at an international level and support Made in Africa production. So this is the second in the series this week, we had Made in Africa earlier in the week, and tonight we have Made in the USA and Made in New York. So our speaker this evening is Bob Bland, which she is the founder and CEO of Manufacture New York, which is a fashion incubator factory hybrid dedicated to providing independent designers with the resources and skills to streamline their production process and transform local manufacturing into the most affordable, innovative option for all. This is really important work right now, bringing skill sets, bringing labor, bringing work back to the US and back to New York after so many years of offshoring and sending it to other countries. So the work that she's been doing is amazing and really important. So thank you both for joining us this evening, and I'll hand it over to you.
Bene, come si fa qui? We have water. I thought ITC. I thought FIT didn't want us to speak too much, so they had put here just a small glass of water to be sure that we go dry and we have to stop at a certain moment. But now we can go on. We are fine. First of all, hello to my friend Abrima from Ghana, who's here the second time. It's nice to see you, Abrima. After 2 years, we don't meet each other. Then we meet in the span of 1 week. We meet twice. We are going not to meet for 10 years now. I don't know what happened. I hope not. Manufacturing, we know it's about transforming raw materials into products. You know what I think, because I've been repeating this so many times here at FIT, that sustainability in manufacturing in the industry of fashion is a function of how you treat people in the process of manufacturing. We know that the value chain, the supply chain of fashion was the ground, the terrain, the place of the artisans. When I was small, an artisan was able to make the whole of a product. In the place where I lived, there was a guy who produced bags for Gucci, and he was making a bag from the beginning to the end. But then, as I always say, we discovered the big production, the big strategies, and the maximization of profits. And so the industry of fashion started tailorizing the supply chain, which is to say, breaking down production into small, simple tasks that are performed by a single individual. By doing this, they deducted value from work, they maximize profits, and they open the door to exploitation. Because you can send work everywhere in the world just looking for cheap labor. It's simple tasks to be performed. And when you open the door to exploitation of people, you also open the door to the exploitation of the environment, because when you don't respect people, you don't respect anything. And so pollution, and so processes that pollute the environment, lack of proper treatment plants, and this and that. Now, things are changing. Things are changing because consumers are aware of what's going on, but also because the logistics of this huge spread value supply chain has become pure madness. You just think about a pair of shoes. The mold on which the shoes are made is produced in Italy. The sole and the insoles are produced in Spain. Then the leather to make the upper of the shoes is a hide which is semi-tanned, wet blue in Kenya or in Ethiopia, and it's finished in India. And then the shoe is assembled in India or in Romania or in Turkey. This is madness. This is madness, but it's a madness that still allows, in the case of big lots of production, quite a good profitability at the expenses of people and of the planet. But today things are changing. Things are changing because there is a new dialogue between brands and consumers, thanks to social media. And so you don't need to have only big runs of production, but you can be a brand with small lots of production with a very precise target audience among consumers. And so much so that a few days ago, I visited the factory here in the garment district in New York, where they produce garments with the cost of labor in New York, but they produce small runs of production for brands who have a very precise target of consumers. And they produce here because the value of producing everything together, of controlling everything close to where you live, close to where you are, is higher than the value of decentralizing production and all the problem of managing logistics. But then there is something else that is changing the scenario of manufacturing, and we are going to talk about this today. This technology. You just think about the innovation brought in by 3D printing. In the example of before, of the shoes, now you can print a mold with the 3D printer. Then you print your sole and your insole. Somebody tell me that you can also print leather, but I've met people who work on molecular modification in order to produce leather, and then everything is done in the same place, and then you have an artisan that assembles everything in the same place. So today you can optimize this process of manufacturing also from the point of view of people and of the environment, not only from the point of view of pure profit, and you can do it because you have all this change. There is also a new dialogue with consumers that favors that. We live in the age of social media. We've already said in the course of these conversations, in the age of individualization, in which brands can really have a dialogue with consumers. I remember the days in which, because I'm old, you see, I look like Santa Claus, but I remember the days in which the dialogue with consumers didn't exist. You had the brands, you had media, advertising, it was big power, big money. They decided what people had to buy and then told people, you buy this because you like it. And everybody was going to buy it. This kind of thing still exists, but there is also another kind of dialogue. And this dialogue on social media allows brands to have different relationship with the consumers, a smaller lot of productions, to optimize processes all in one place. And I wanted in this series of conversation you to have an example of this. We've been speaking about how we optimize production processes on bags, on shoes, on fabric in Africa for big brands, but there are also realities that optimize processes, creating opportunities of work for a lot of people, even in places where the cost of labor is high. And an example is exactly here in New York. This example is called Manufacture New York. My friend Bob Bland directs Manufacture New York, which is an example of how, by using technology and traditional skills together, you can create opportunities by optimizing the process of manufacturing in a new and more clever way. So I'm very curious to listen to Bob, to her activities, to what she does, because Bob is an incredible person. Whenever we have a conversation, I learn something. So much so that today, instead of staying here like an old caryatid, I'm going to sit in there because I am a learner and I want to learn something from you. So guys, I finish with one invitation. Let's go to visit Manufacture New York, because you cannot study fashion at FIT and then you want to become a big manager and you have an experience like this at your doorstep and you don't know that. This would be stupid. So let's go to visit this entity. Bob promised that she's going to organize the visit. I will be there on the 15th in the morning to learn a lot. If you want to join me, come. We are there together. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Bland.
Wow. Well, thank you for that generous introduction, Simone. And Sas, thank you so much for organizing this, and thank you to everyone at FIT for being such supporters of ethical and sustainable fashion. As we've discussed, my name is Bob Bland. I'm the CEO of Manufacture New York. And we're creating a manufacturing innovation center in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, that is at the intersection of sustainability, wearable technology, and garment manufacturing, specifically in the style of Manhattan's Garment District. And our mission is to reawaken and rebuild America's fashion industry, foster the next wave of businesses, and create a transparent, sustainable global supply chain. And I think one reason why Simone has me here today is to talk about this as an ecosystem for urban manufacturing that we are starting here and piloting here in New York City. But there's many lessons that we can learn from this pilot that could be applicable to urban manufacturing centers all around the world. And very rightly, what we're talking about here is process innovation in the fashion supply chain, and specifically concentrating on vertically integrating the fashion supply chain in the most sustainable way possible, which is often also the most practical way. And for me, as a fashion designer, I founded Manufacture New York in 2012. But prior to that, I was a corporate designer working for brands like Ralph Lauren, Marc Jacobs, Tommy Hilfiger, bigger brands. And I also oversaw production overseas in China and saw the way that business was done on both sides of the ocean. Prior to starting my own line, Brooklyn Royalty, in 2006, that was all made here locally. And it was such a more satisfying experience actually working with all of the different contract manufacturers that were local, learning from their expertise, having the ability to interact with and develop my garments hands-on, and know that I was contributing to the local economy in a way that just even my small line was making an impact for that business, and often for dozens of businesses, because many contractors were involved. And the virtuous cycle of also having every local boutique that we sold in was benefiting, and we were benefiting from them. And the connection, the social fabric of New York City, and the cultural impact that we were creating through doing this virtuous cycle of designing, developing, producing, and distributing was something that is truly irreplaceable by outsourcing. So I would just preface that it's undeniable in New York City and in many urban centers in the US and around the world, real estate prices are at an all-time high. Living expenses, overhead is nearly impossible for most small businesses starting up. And many of my friends who were much more successful than me lost their businesses in the recession and afterwards. And this is a real problem that we are gutting the middle class of the United States and then most of our creative economy by not allowing people to take risks, by not giving them the opportunity to be able to actually create groundbreaking fashion. And what struck me is that this was a solvable problem. I always see problems as opportunities, and as a serial entrepreneur, every time that I see a major problem that's going unsolved, I try to create a business around it that's going to solve it. And so for New York City, what we needed was to take some of the lessons of overseas manufacturing in terms of vertical integration, which is often happening in either rural centers or in coastal towns, and then take all of that and apply the lessons of what is the best in terms of process with vertical integration to the urban setting, and acknowledging the true problems that are happening here in New York City, especially in the garment district, where many people are being priced out, and businesses in Brooklyn, in Long Island City, in Manhattan are disappearing. We're down to just 15,000 jobs in apparel manufacturing, and those artisanal skills are very important to preserve for the next generation, because the average age of a manufacturer at this point is over 60 nationally for the US. So there is going to be an enormous skills gap if we don't solve this problem in an elegant way that's sustainable and long-term. So what our vision is for Manufacture New York is to combine the best of fashion incubation and acceleration of startups, again, at the intersection of fashion, sustainability, and wearable technology, with the product development and small run production that every startup designer needs. And then one thing that struck us early on after piloting our Garment Center pilot program, where we did all of our incubation and product development and small run production services in 2013, was that manufacturers themselves were having just as much problem as the startups with core things: access to affordable real estate, access to capital, access to equipment. These were universal problems that everybody was having, so why don't we combine everyone together and create a solution that'll benefit not just designers or not just manufacturers, but everyone. One way we've been able to do that is by combining wearable tech into the conversation from the beginning. Because I don't know about you guys, but for me as a fashion designer, I'm not an engineer. I have no chemistry or biology background. I really don't know how to make a circuit, despite the fact that I went to the nerdiest high school in America. And I know how to program a little, but that's about it. So wearable technology for me, when it started emerging as a major potential force, again, instead of seeing it as a problem, we decided to embrace it and say, you know what? If the actual fashion industry isn't the one to embrace wearable technology, then it's all just going to be Silicon Valley. And we all know those people aren't fashionable. So, it's time for us to own our industry and own where it's going. Yeah, I'm just kidding. There's some fashionable people. Anyway, I've met a couple. But so at any rate, what we need to do is, we're the experts at artisanal manufacturing. We're the experts at all the specific process that currently go into making a garment. We're also the experts at aesthetic, at not just craft, but at merchandising, at marketing, at everything that goes into creating a fashion brand. And we need to participate in this wearable technology revolution from the very inception. And our manufacturers deserve to benefit from that financially and through a complete upgrade in terms of equipment and skills. And that's what we're working with at Manufacture New York. So process innovation through collaboration means that we're bringing everyone on site in a way that you'll just run in the halls into specialty manufacturers of every kind that you're going to need, designers who may or may not be doing things like you, but you can certainly relate to each other, a media center where you can shoot and produce podcasts and tape all sorts of videos, product shots, you name it. And then also a workforce training center and a design incubator, so that everybody from the very beginning of the supply chain moving forward can work together, and that we can all benefit together as well. We ended up getting a lot of traction for this idea, and in 2014, at the end of 2014, we received a $3.5 million grant from the New York City Economic Development Corporation to make it a reality. We've also received support from the Obama administration and the Small Business Administration. And I think that it shows that there is a lot of value as long as we continually press city, state, and federal government to be a part of this, because one word I learned through doing this process, again, just as a fashion designer who the most political I'd ever gotten is voting. That was really it before I started Manufacturing New York. Now I've testified in front of the House of Representatives. I've advised the SBA on what a micro business is. Believe it or not, they still think small businesses are 500 people or less. Who knew? Yeah, they didn't actually have a category for 25 people or less, which is most businesses. So, I think there's a real traction and a need for change, and we're dedicated to the public-private partnerships that'll make that possible. So, supply chain mapping and transparency within the supply chain is easy if you're starting from the ground up. And embedding sustainability into every single part of your process, including the actual building materials that you're using, whether it be post-manufacturing waste fabric or reclaimed wood or fabric ductwork, is we literally want the bones of Manufacturing New York to be sustainable as well. And for that transparency to also be something that can be marketed by not just our designers, but our manufacturers, and we can assist them with branding and getting out their skills and their product in a way that is currently unavailable. So where are we doing this? Liberty View Industrial Plaza is in Sunset Park, right by Industry City. And it's a 1.2 million square foot facility that just underwent a $100 million renovation. So this is currently the highest quality manufacturing space in New York City. We're taking a 160,000 square foot floor, so that's a city block. And we literally want to create a 21st century version of the garment district with all the components that I described previously. And that will ultimately be home to 25 to 30 manufacturing companies, hopefully dozens and dozens of designers and technologists. And we'd ultimately like to see the entire facility of Liberty View employ 1,200 people. So here's some pictures. But you'll see it if you come on the 15th. And it's part of a greater vision for the waterfront in Sunset Park that is something that could be applied to all sorts of urban manufacturing centers where we're not the only ones doing this. A lot of people are redeveloping industrial centers to be urban manufacturing hubs across this entire 20-block radius. So I would just say, look at Sunset Park in the future, because I think that we're going to be a hub for manufacturing for the next few generations. And then the other thing that we're working on is with the federal government, we're working on workforce development programs that will help to meet that skills gap. Because the truth is, in order for us to train not just current manufacturers who need to upgrade their skill set, but also the next generation, we really need to start as soon as high school and college. And we need to look at apprenticeship programs, internship programs, just straight up public education. Like we have classes like Intro to Biomaterials, you know, and they're just on like little weekend classes, like little light things that you can just kind of start diving into. We recently had one on wearable technology and circuitry where in 3 sessions, everyone came out with an interactive garment that they had come up with themselves. And we also work a lot with zero waste cutting and textile waste. So we see manufacturing jobs as the great jobs of the future, because really when you look at where technology is going, fashion touches everything. And so whether you're talking about the defense sector or safety or healthcare or just regular fashion, there are so many different places for us to touch and transform the way people express themselves, and then also the way that clothes are made, and then closing the cycle and making it more possible for not just small brands who are starting out, but for bigger brands to address the problems with pollution. You know, fashion is the #2 polluter in the world behind oil, and then also with textile waste. And all of those solutions are much easier to work on in an urban center where every part of the supply chain is on site. Like, for instance, we're piloting programs with textile waste where we're doing sorting on site. And we're about to start introducing, believe it or not, robots into that sorting cycle, you know, because that's an example of, it's tricky. You have to think about, okay, what is the most important thing for humans to do, and what is our best use in the future? Because the truth is, the robots are coming. That's actually happening. I know, it sounds so scary, and I actually did get up one morning and say to myself, Bob, you're ignoring this because you're scared. You you gotta stop that. Because if you're scared and you don't sit there and acknowledge what's going on in the rest of the industry, especially the more well-funded parts of the industry where it's very easy to get venture capital funding for something like creating a robot. If the fashion industry isn't involved, if we aren't involved in that process and in that dialogue from the beginning, then we're gonna be cut out of it in a way that might result in them not understanding how clothes are really made, or how they could be more sustainable, or how they could be more inclusive in their process. And that's really what Manufacture New York's all about. So, I don't know, Simone, I could tell them all about our wearable tech labs. Do you want to have more of a conversation? Okay, yeah, okay, I can tell you more about this. Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, so in terms of what is wearable technology, I keep on throwing out this term. What we think of wearable technology as is an opportunity around advanced digital fabrication, soft circuits, and wearable technology. And I'm especially interested in biomaterials and chemistry and how we can create more sustainable processes and materials through biology. Digital fabrication can be anything from taking a Shimaseki knitting machine and hacking it with a new interface that allows you to generate prints with algorithms on the internet, to 3D printing. And the thing with 3D printing is that we have to address the actual substrates that are entering the 3D printers and ensure that they're sustainable. And so that has to be part of the conversation from the very beginning. Is 3D printing is great, additive manufacturing is great. What are we using to do the additive manufacturing, and is it sustainable? With soft circuits, this is truly an incredible breakout area, and anybody can start working in this. Like, we have classes on this all the time, but so do a lot of great, like iBeam has classes on this, GenSpace, New Lab. So you should definitely research this a little bit. In terms of flexible circuitry, there are people developing circuitry that can be temporary tattoos. We have developed some circuitry for clothing. I even know someone who's doing it in the MIT Media Lab for nail art. And you know, functional fashion, and especially when it gets to the fiber level, is the next gen of fashion. And I think that what ultimately will result in the race that's going on right now is to create a fiber that is embeddable into any fashion that functions as a circuit. So instead of having to embed a silicon circuit in your clothing, you're literally just weaving circuits. And the important thing about bringing the fashion industry into this from the very beginning is that this technology should be accessible to manufacturers, in that the process innovations that we're creating should be with pre-existing machinery and pre-existing processes that we already have, so that we can actually work with pre-existing manufacturers and not put them out of business. And that's something that we're very dedicated to. And then in terms of biology and chemistry and biofabrication, I believe Simone knows Suzanne Lee from Modern Meadow. They're one of our neighbors down the street. But there's many people all over the world working on solutions, everything from vegan leather and creating, we have a class where you can literally just create a little piece of biomaterial in a petri dish with essentially a kombucha SCOBY. So if you know what I'm talking about, there's a lot of different cottage ways that you can start to get into this, and there's kits you can buy on the internet. There's all sorts of really cool ways that you can start to get into this process and understand it. And I think understanding these processes, even in a small way, is a huge step forward for the future of fashion. And this quote, I'm just going to end with this quote. Vertically integrated factories, such as Manufacture New York, where the designers work closely with producers, have the potential to elevate and reskill the manufacturing jobs they create by bridging the divide between designers, consumers, and people who make things. This is New York fashion's most radical promise. There are many hurdles to overcome, but hopes are high that New York fashion could become the harbinger of a 21st century urban industrial revolution, heralding a new, more equitable era for the city. And that is truly our hope with Manufacture New York. And the most important part about what we're doing is it's really a business as a movement, so anyone can be involved. And that's kind of the whole point, is that you don't have to be really high in your career. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing with your line. Everyone being on kind of the same level and leveling the playing field is what I've been dedicated to from the beginning with this. And we've created quite a community around it, and it's only going to grow as we continue this path towards bringing together domestic manufacturing, sustainability, and tech in a way that benefits everyone. Is that good enough?
It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, is that good?
When somebody listens to you, you develop ideas, and I've seen that you make use of source map to do the traceability of processing.
Leah's been a friend from the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
It's just been great, yeah.
We just signed a contract with them to do the same in our system of impact assessment and to follow the traceability of everything, of all the supply chain. And then I've seen the innovation that you have in leather, which is extremely, in materials, extremely interesting, because you could design materials already in view of their recycling or of their disposal, so that you don't have the huge amount of materials in dump site that you have today, or at the same time, you have materials whose production is clean. All these molecular modification and so on. The only thing which worries me, you spoke about kombucha, where you grow. I always drink kombucha, then I'm afraid to develop a leather jacket in my stomach. So
no, it's not going to happen.
You have to be sure it doesn't happen.
Rest assured.
I think you have questions to Bob. I keep my questions for my visit, which will be a great visit. By the way, we are coming on the 15th because we have another 2 lectures here at FIT. I'm here with our persons, with our people for fair labor and for impact assessment, and they will all come with me to visit Manufacture New York. So join us on the 15th in there. Now the questions to Bob. Ask questions.
We have 2 microphones set up either side. If you can make your way there, or if you can't, put your hand up and I'll get the microphone to you.
Hi, my name is Brenna. My question is regarding engaging students and young professionals to see manufacturing as like a real viable work or career, and like changing the opinion of like manufacturing from what it used to be, this like dirty, grimy sweatshop thing, to something that's actually, it's not just following a certain script. Like there is some flexibility and like you know, and also like, I know a lot of your programs are really great for training, but they are still very expensive. And how do you, like, are you giving any sort of certification that people can say, like, I did this workshop and it's like viable for their resume as well?
Well, that's a great question. So first, the first thing was more of a statement, but in regards to right now, the category of fashion designer in U.S. labor statistics is growing by 50% every year. And I think that that's a big misunderstanding in that many people around the country feel that fashion design is the only category of job that they can go into in fashion. And public awareness of all of the amazing jobs that do exist in the fashion industry, some that are much more vital, quite honestly, and that's me speaking as a fashion designer. Like for instance, pattern makers on average make $75,000. That's a terrific salary. That's a good job. You know, I wish I had been smart enough to be a pattern maker. So, I think it's a matter of awareness campaigns, and the important thing with letting people know more about the diversity of jobs that are available and needed, and there's two things to it. One is the training component, is the different categories of training have to be emphasized in schools, but not just colleges. Like FID does an incredible job of offering a very wide range of technical training, and that's very important. But even as early as high school, like I had already figured out that I was a fashion designer by the time I was 12. And I think that that's a lot of folks' experience in the creative industry. So I think that we need to start concentrating on introducing the making skills and the design disciplines into schools earlier, like even elementary school and middle school. And I think that those sort of programs, while they could be piloted by one group, it could take an entire industry focus to really concentrate on that. And there is the beautiful thing about workforce training programs and all of these new education programs is there is funding available. There are grants. There's all sorts of opportunities to fund these sort of programs. It's just about people working in coherence with each other and not just making individual efforts. In regard to our education program, we're just piloting it. So we've been doing it for one season now. And later this spring, we're going to be working towards launching our first nonprofit. It's going to be called the Manufacturer Foundation, and it'll include all of our public education, workforce training, public awareness campaigns, and subsidized incubator programs. I think one thing that people need to realize is that Manufacturing New York itself is a startup. We started with me and postcards and business cards and a website in 2012. And this is what we've been able to accomplish in the last 3.5 years. But the beautiful thing about having our platform and our movement be a startup is that we can grow with our community, and then we can also be more open in interacting and showing people, hey, this is how businesses evolve. So, over time, I'm sure we'll be able to introduce some more affordable programs through the foundation, and then also through just learning more about running educational programs. But in the meantime, I highly recommend FIT's Hot Topics. Many of them are only $25 a pop, and that is just unbelievably awesome.
Thank you for being here. I'm very excited about your Manufacture New York. I'm actually a designer that does production locally and tries to, do things zero waste and all of those efforts. Now, I think part of the reasons that we send the jobs, especially in the manufacturing sector, abroad was to take advantage of low wages, but also to sort of get rid of the pollution that the manufacturing produces, you know. So now that we are discussing this possibility of bringing things back inland, is there a real effort to educate people about the pollution? Because once we start reshoring, manufacturing. So we start dyeing the leather here, and we start producing fabric here. There's going to be a lot of pollution. So I think parallel to the effort of bringing everything back is we have to make sure that we know how to tackle that problem of pollution that is going to be produced with manufacturing.
Yeah, that's a great point, and actually something that I was gonna bring up regardless is one of the most beautiful things about creating movements for manufacturing in urban areas is that typically the environmental regulations, and specifically in New York City, are much higher than in other areas. So sometimes the constraint of the urban environment in terms of designing a new system and innovating on a new system allows a lot of exterior pressure that forces people coming in to create new manufacturing to comply with very high regulations that ultimately result in them having to use sustainable systems inevitably. And so we consider it actually a big plus that in New York City, you can't dye leather in an unsustainable manner. You will get fined, you will get, you know, kicked out of your business. Like, it's a major, dyeing is a huge potential risk in manufacturing in New York City. And when we even initially looked at it, we were like, oh, well, shoot, we're gonna have to definitely do blue sign like, for instance, blue sign is a extremely highly sustainable way of making denim where you can reduce the water waste to 6% of what it would be previously. And then also you can even close the loop on the dyeing where the waste indigo ends up in bricks that you can actually use for other things. And I've seen the machines that do it, and there's actually portable ones that you can have in a space as small as Manufacturing New York. It is requiring us building a lot more building systems to be able to accommodate some of these processes for recycling wastewater and recycling chemicals and ensuring just basically reducing chemical waste. But the beauty of co-locating everyone together is that we can all share costs around that and ensure that anyone who is going to have any sort of waste dyes, waste paints, any sort of other type of wastewater, anyone who is doing washing and dyeing, by co-locating them all together, whether they're doing denim or something else, allows everyone to have more affordable costs when it comes to infrastructure. Because the major hurdles for manufacturers in being sustainable in New York City are typically, again, around not just staying in an affordable space, but if they need to relocate to a more affordable space, the moving costs are typically extremely excessive because there's so much machinery, and typically they're moving from a big space to another big space relatively compared to, say, if you were going to move your office or your showroom or something like that. And then additionally with, in terms of procuring better equipment, typically the good equipment that is more sustainable, that is more energy efficient, is much more expensive than what they would usually have. So that's why we're looking at doing cooperative buying programs throughout the space to ensure that everyone has access to sustainable solutions.
Thank you.
She made a point which I would like to underline. You pollute abroad because abroad you don't have the legislation and it's not
really
enforced.
helps.
That's the point.
Yeah.
It's not that it's impossible not to pollute. Now there are technologies, clean technologies, that allow you to have a mill to do dyeing, to do leather without polluting. The problem is legislation and enforcement of legislation. In my place in Italy, 40 years ago, people were dying like flies of cancer because of the pollution of the textile mills. Then a legislation was enforced, and that stopped. It's a matter of legislation enforcement. So when you reshore to a place where there is a legislation, the problem doesn't exist. You go away to run away from the legislation. The second point is that there are technologies that are revolutionary in this today. We are producing leather in Ethiopia without heavy metals and chrome. Chrome and heavy metal free. It's clean leather. The Kering Group, the owners of Gucci and Stella McCartney, to give you a name, is doing the same in Italy. And this is one of the futures. The vegan leather you are speaking about is another thing. You have the technology to be clean today. The problem is not pollution. The problem is enforcement of legislation and adoption of the right technologies. Thank you.
Thank
the
you.
Other way there. The other side there.
Hi. I was just wondering, I don't know a lot about wearable tech, but this was a really nice, fascinating introduction. I wondered if you could speak a little bit more to like the functionality of it. So like some practical examples of how it's being used in an innovative way. I'm very curious. And then also, just quickly, if you could tell us a little bit about more about the producers and the designers at Manufacture New York and sort of your vision for that, and then who they sort of currently are and how they've come to be there.
Right, yeah. So Manufacture New York, we currently we have 20 startups on site that are either designers or the ancillary businesses that designers need, like a company that helps produce tech packs, a PR company, like that sort of thing, you know, so that they can help each other. What we offer is the core. We help designers on site with business development, with the actual product development. So making sure that if they need patterns, sample making, all of that, that they can do their product development on site. We also offer sustainability and domestic sourcing services to a variety of designers, both on-site and off-site. And that all started with our Garment Center pilot program in 2013, where we just had this tiny 2,000 square foot, but it was a full floor in the garment district on the second floor. And it was amazing because we were able to get 15 designers working out of the studio space, and luckily it was beautiful, and we had built it out by hand ourselves, and so it really worked. I actually have a bit of nostalgia for being there. I wish I was still there sometimes, but that was when we realized that the real game changer was basically. And this was when co-working was just becoming a thing. So the other thing is that we've evolved along with all the other different evolutions that have been happening in the sharing and the collaborative economies. But yeah, at that time it was really like there was no co-working space that you could go and bring your industrial equipment. And that was a major problem, you know. So the beautiful thing at our Brooklyn flagship is that we've got so much space. So designers can really have a beautiful, proper studio. And so we have tons of designers that have that. And then we also have manufacturers. One specific cut and sew manufacturer that we have is named Casa de Moda. And they were a garment district save that their building was being turned into a hotel. And they weren't on lease because they'd been there for 20 years. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the landlord was like, "Hey, you got to get out. I'm selling the building." And so we brought them over last year, in January of last year. And it's been an incredible experience for them, where they've been able to grow very quickly and also optimize their processes. And we're also generating a lot of business for them just out of the co-location strategy. aside from that, we've just activated our first 20,000 square feet. So we just finished building out a showcase space of 20,000 square feet. We have about 30,000 square feet of folks already on site, and we're just going to keep building it out in stages. So we have 60,000 square feet of folks, everything from cut and sew factories, shoes, digital printing, fabric, lots of different types of fabric uses and textiles, like Le Souk, the sustainable textile resource. They're on site with us. It's a mix of all the different parts of the industry, and we're going to keep on building it out in stages. I hope that helped. Yeah. You kind of have to see it, honestly.
No, that
it might
totally
sound kind of
makes
crazy.
sense. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's some questions, but I know, Simone, you have a few slides that you want to show as well.
To make an
correct?
announcement, mamma mia.
Let
See,
me.
see.
Et voilà.
An announcement. Look at this. Beautiful costumes for theater. They are made in New York out of materials we produce in Africa. Fabric, accessories, and so on. It's a theatrical play which is going to have the premiere in New York on the 10th of March at the Kitchen Theater. The name of the play is Elijah Green. The director is a young theater director and creative director whom I admire, Andrew Odrenjak. And he's got around him an incredible team of creative people. We engaged in this by supplying all the raw materials and by getting Andrew to travel all across Africa with us, because we believe that art still plays a role in guiding us towards a better world. You know that fashion copies a lot of art. You know that fashion gets inspiration from art, but art is always a step ahead of fashion, always a step ahead of fashion. If you want to work in fashion, you've got to keep an eye on art, because you know where the visuals of the world go. This is a good opportunity. Come to see it. It's on the 10th of April, and then also the following week you check on the website of the Kitchen Theater. On the 15th, I will also be there with Chloe, and, no, 16th, Chloe, On the 17th, Madonna. On the 17th, we are also there, and after the theater, after the play, we have a talk with the director, with the costume maker, with everybody on stage. So if you come on the 17th, you get bored by the talk also on top of a beautiful play. If you go one of the other days, you just get the play.
So a couple of things. I neglected to say that this series is actually an initiative of the Dean of Art and Design and the Dean of Graduate Studies. So this series is an outgrowth of that, in collaboration with our dear friend Simone Cipriani and all of his partners. So I want to thank both of our speakers for a really amazing talk once again. There are several to this series, 2 more coming in March, 2 more in April, and again in May. So please keep an eye on the website, RSVP, and we hope to see you at many more of the events.
Shall we put some desire to come? In April, we have the creator of United Arrows, the coolest brand for men in Japan, who is here with us. And we have the owner of Camper to tell us about the experience of a family company that produces shoes with us. In May, we have the best head hunter for the industry of fashion all over the world. But in March, we are going to talk about fair labor impact assessment, and we are going to visit Bob.
So lots to look forward to. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Don't be lazy. Grazie, Bob.